We're joined today with Pastor John and Pastor Bill from our first match as pastor partner. And I want to ask you both first, how has pastor partner made a difference for First Reformed Church?
Well, I'll start. It's made a big difference for me in the sense I think it's given me a lot of freedom that I wouldn't have otherwise had. I think specifically when weeks when Bill preaches, that opens up just a lot of time in my schedule. And then I'm free to either have a day off, which is a rare occasion. Historically, it has been. And just what that means for me, just in terms of if my wife is home that day, or just catching up things around the house just to clear my mind, or just have a day off just to relax or do whatever. That's been huge. And so it gives me a little bit of breathing room in my schedule. It also frees me up to invest in things that I normally don't have time to. There's the tyranny of the urgent, and Sunday is coming around, and there's classes and sermons and meetings and agendas that I just have to get cranked out week after week. And so having Bill around has really freed me up from that, to be able to invest either in long-term strategic planning. Where do we need to be in a year? Where what's coming up? It's springtime now. What do I need to be thinking about now for the fall? It's been really important in terms of freeing me up for that, and also freeing me up to spend more time with my leaders, to do more discipling, leadership development, and not necessarily programmatic, but just spending time with them, having an afternoon together. Where are they at? What's going on? And those are the things, again, with just the weekly grind, I often don't have time for. So Bill has been able to bring just a lot of freedom for me in that, but also Bill's been able to take on projects and different initiatives that I just never had time to get to. And so I had a stack of ideas on my desk of, wouldn't it be great if we could this, and we've done some thinking, we've done some planning, we just don't have the horsepower or the leadership to execute that. And to have Bill kind of step in and be like, I can run with this, has been just fantastic. So we've definitely seen a lot of opportunities develop because Bill was able to just step in. So there's just been a lot of difference. In my experience, and lots of literature point to this truth that revitalized churches begin with revitalized leaders. And a big step for me in that process has been having Bill around. I didn't have the opportunity to necessarily have some revitalization. Now, of course, part of that is my own personal spiritual disciplines and things like that. But there's this other component of it that I didn't have the opportunity, the time to invest in those kind of things that I needed to as the congregational leader. And Bill has really, again, freed me up to do that. And that's been just the biggest difference, is the change it has had on me, which then just sends out ripples through our leaders and then out into our congregation.
Well, obviously, my perspective is not quite as personal because this isn't my church. But the kinship I now have here has been wonderful, personally and with the congregation. But I think in my observation, as we initially talked about pastor-partner ministry, I think we recognized that every partnership would be different, every church would be different, every solo and retired pastor would be different. And this was not a church that was on the brink of closing or was unhealthy in ways that are so typical in churches. It was a healthy church. Many very good things were happening, but I think perhaps the progress was slowed because of a solo pastor who simply couldn't get to everything. And when I arrived, it was thrilling to see John had no lack of ideas or strategy. he just didn't have the time to make some of those things happen. And I think it's been thrilling then to watch as the vision that God had given him could become reality because there was someone to help to do that. And in my time at the church, I've certainly seen the impact of those visions that John had that now had come to reality, and they seem to be making a difference in the church.
John, you had mentioned before that having Bill come on to help you was like having a top-notch player step in. You didn't have to teach him or train him or bring him up to speed. Tell us what that was like.
It was awesome. Yeah, I've said, Bill was like our lottery draft pick. Day one starter, making a big contribution. And that is, I think, one of the huge advantages with Pastor Partner. And I've had seminary interns before, and it's been a great experience, but there's a lot more investment into than return out of. And there's certainly a place for that. I was a benefit of it. Hopefully we've benefited others. But in terms of really pushing a church forward, that's not the answer. We needed someone to come in who day one could make a difference and could do, I don't want to say heavy lifting, but top level leadership. I know what to do. I've done this for many years. And as soon as I started explaining things to Bill, he knew right away, I know exactly where you're going with this. And I catch the vision and I know what it's going to take to get there. And so there was really no long on-ramp for Bill coming here. It was as soon as he started, it was he just hit the ground running. And I noticed immediately the impact he was having on me and the congregation. And so as we talk about 6 months or 1 year or partnerships that go beyond that, the impact can be instantaneous. And how valuable that is in this program.
I think there's a factor that we all like to talk about planning and strategy and all, but there's a divine factor here in the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that in our other partnership as well, where it was so obvious that God did something in bringing people together who were a great match for the particular needs. And we would anticipate that in many of these partnerships, the solo pastor needs a mentor. And that will be a wonderful role for a retired pastor to be able to come as a mentor and perhaps fill in a lot of gaps that seminary can't provide. John didn't need a mentor. He's well-formed, he's strategic, he's what a pastor ought to be. He just had more than one person could do. And for me then to have the privilege of being matched with John and to see how God had brought us together. And I think as others think about the partnership, some solo pastors may think, well, I don't think I need a mentor, I just need help. Yes, that's what this is about. And other solo pastors will be saying, wow, I need somebody who can coach me. Yes. And I think you can trust God then to help to bring the right people together for that kind of match.
And the great part is that it is a mentorship program, even though it's not, meaning that while you're not mentoring John, you're helping with all these different things that he needs your help with. In the process, you're mentoring him because you are showing him different perspectives and different ideas, and you have each other to rely on. And so the percentage of mentorship in a pastor partner program can be high or can be low. And even though you may not think you need any, you're going to get some just because you have that person there to help through the heavy lifting and the different things that need to be done. And sometimes you might think mentorship is the main thing you need, but the problem with mentorship is that it just takes more time off you to be as a solo pastor to be involved in a mentorship program. And Pastor John, you told me about that before. You said, a mentorship program just adds more to my calendar.
Yeah, I'm going to get to do less.
Right.
And yet at the same time, Bill has filled that role at different times. I remember we had a lunch at Applebee's last summer, and I just kind of poured out oh, Bill, I'm just, I'm not sure about, the future. And all these questions, and have you ever gone through this? And Bill had kind of this oh sure, I know, and
Been there.
Yeah, been there. I've worked through that myself, and even just before we were filming, I just was sharing some things that had popped up lately and were kind of frustrating. Bill was saying, oh yeah, I've been there, and kind of laughing along with it, like, sure, that's the dynamic. And so we haven't had so much like the formal, maybe as much as like Bruce and Dan have had, like, I really need coaching with sort of things, but there have been plenty of issues, either with the church or with my own personal life, that I've shared with Bill, and I'm like, I don't know who else I can share this with. And where would you, where do you hear the Lord in this, Bill? And so that's just been a wonderful thing. So it hasn't been the lead kind of characteristic of our relationship, but it's been fantastic when I've needed it, just to have him there.
Well, it's, and this is, perhaps I'm jumping to a different question, but I think one of the surprises to me, which shouldn't have been, is how much John has mentored me. And you would hope that at this stage of life you don't have to learn a lot, although we should never stop learning. But I have learned so much, and one of the fascinating things is that John has re-triggered my vision in areas where I briefly say, maybe I shouldn't be retired. Now that doesn't last long. Yes, I should be retired, and it gives me the privilege of doing this. But it's a two-way street, and I think every retired pastor who enters into it is going to find a recharging. Typically when you're retired, you're doing that because you're tired, and there's really a renewing.
You're
aspect.
so tired, you're retired. It's like
Yes,
you're tired and
there
tired
is.
again. Yes.
But this is a renewing relationship,
Yes.
and that's been a wonderful thing.
Great. Pastor John, one of the things you told me early on that got me thinking about pastor partner was that you would never accept a calling as a solo pastor again.
Yes. After I had been here, and this is the only time I'd ever been a solo pastor. I'd done ministry always in a larger context of a staff. And I didn't really think a whole lot of it when I took a call to be a solo pastor. It presented a whole realm of challenges and difficulties, both as a congregational leader, but also as an individual, and just personally trying to then balance family sort of things. And after having gone through this experience for several years, I'd say probably after I was here about 3 or 4 years, I had said, I'm here and I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but whenever I leave, I'm not going to do this again. This is just, it's too difficult. And Dan had said something earlier that as a solo pastor, there really is, maybe it's unspoken, but an expectation you're going to be good at everything, or at least you're going to deal with everything. And we all know, if you've been in ministry for more than a week, there's things that you're good at, there's things that you get excited about, and things that are areas of weakness or not as much of a gifting or just a drain to you. And as a solo pastor, you really don't have a whole lot of options. Like, you're it. And after kind of going through that and plowing through that field for 4 years, it was kind of like, and just looking at the biblical model, we really don't see this idea of solo ministry. Ministry is always done in the context of partnerships and people going out together, working together. Whether it's Jesus sending out 2 by 2, Jethro telling Moses, you need more people to help you, or the apostles saying, you feed the widows and we do the ministry of word and prayer. And there's always this idea of dividing up and splitting and partnerships, and so just to kind of go forward in this. Oh, and just to throw in, Paul's ministry, he always is going out with somebody and raising up the next person. So this idea of doing it on our own really seemed not to fit the biblical model, and I can see why. It's just very trying. I mean, and just even Jesus himself, like, he didn't do it on his own. He had a team around him. He wasn't like the ultimate solo pastor. He was a shepherd who was raising up under shepherds. And so the beauty with pastor partner is it does in several ways remove you out of that solo kind of feeling and context. I do have help in the pulpit. I do have help brainstorming and thinking about upcoming series. So we're doing a big next year vision. Well, how are we going to fulfill that meeting in the next week or two? And Bill led that for us last year, and that allowed me then to be a guy just around the table sharing my thoughts and opinions. And Bill's going to be reprising that role. So I don't know. It just like, and the word I keep using, it frees you up. It's not, you have to do this, and you need to do all this well, and you have no one else to talk to, and no one else to turn to. The Pastor Partner Project has really given relief to that, where for the first number of years I was here, like there was none, like there was nobody else, and good things were happening, and I had great lay leadership, but there was still a level of like a really truly of a pastoral, like equal level, and it's like I really needed the other yoke to be filled, to somebody to pull with me. And that's kind of what Bill has done. So you've been a great ox, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Your towing power.
John, you have been leading First through a revitalization process. And in fact, I think you wrote your doctoral thesis on revitalization in the church, correct? How has Pastor Partner and Bill's partnership with you helped that revitalization?
Oh, it's been really important. When we went through the revitalization process for a number of years, and we had a coach who, in many ways, was kind of like a predecessor to Pastor Partner. It was someone who came in and did some wonderful consulting, and we went through a very intentional process for several years that got us to a healthier place that we were at when Bill came on. But then it was, okay, the now what? Okay, we're in a better place. We're now more prepared, God, to do something in and through us in a more significant way. And that's where, just the Lord's perfect timing, that's right when Bill kind of came on the scene and really allowed us to say, okay, now we can start to build on these things, and we can start this new ministry. We can go deeper in discipleship. Again, Bill's going to now take some responsibilities that's going to allow me to kind of take next level steps. So in terms of our revitalization, where I think some pastor partners, maybe like Bruce and Dan, it's like I'm going to help you get through that. Again, Bill came in on the tail end of that, but what he was able, in him coming, it allowed us to be able to build, sustain momentum and keep going and keep moving and saying, the now what's next? And we couldn't have gotten there. The what's next, we couldn't have answered that question, I think, as effectively as we have. It's not been perfect, but as effectively as we have through Bill's partnership. And we just actually had a meeting with our congregation just this week and shared some church health survey statistics we've been through. We've seen just a wonderful trending upwards that started prior to Bill coming here, but have now been sustained through that. And Bill's been, I think, a big part of that. And I think Dan and Bruce shared that, their church had been a statistical decline since 2000, and our church was in a similar spot. And we've now hit the curve, and we're now moving up. And again, I think that Bill's presence has a direct impact on that. I don't think it's a coincidence that, a year or two after Bill got here, we were in a place to, start to move back up, because we were ready for him now in the specific role I think that he could play in our church.
people in Michigan understand what it's like to have your car get stuck in the snow or on ice. And I almost think it's a little bit like you're driving along and you see this car and it's obviously stuck, and maybe the spouse is at the steering wheel and the other one's pushing from the back and it's just not getting going. So you stop your car, you jump out and you get behind with them, and just that second person pushing is just the tipping point, and it goes. And I feel like, Pastor John and the church, they had the vision, they had so many things, and it wasn't that they were stuck, but another person to give that little bit more shove to get the momentum moving faster, I think has been a key thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference between a pastor partner and a consultant, in that a consultant comes in and tells you everything you need to do and then leaves.
Yes.
And you're left doing it, whereas the pastor partner comes in and helps you do all those things.
We've both been to the pastoral conferences, and you come home with this big notebook and all of the notes that you took during the workshops, and you're thinking, wow, this is great. But then the notebook goes on the shelf and the notes get slid in a drawer because the realities of ministry hit you, and you just don't have the time or the energy to enact all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
The conference was great, but I've had the experience of almost being discouraged rather than encouraged, because here's all this great stuff and you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah, here's all these wonderful things that'll never happen where you're at.
Exactly.
So what are the critical things that you two do that made your match and make your match successful?
Well, I would say some of the critical things is flexibility. When we were talking about this whole idea of Pastor Partner Project, there was this sense of, Bill was retired and he did not want to be as tied down. So where Dan and Bruce meet weekly and it's very structured, ours is highly unstructured.
Yes.
Bill travels. I've got 3 young kids at home, and so our schedules are kind of all over the place. And that's and it was like Bill kind of came into this like, hey, if this is going to work, there has to be flexibility, which was good for me. Again, the last thing I needed at this point was like another weekly meeting. So for us, is the format of doing more like project-based kind of things, and Bill would work on it at his own time when he was available. And I mean, during our first year of this, you wrote a book. Which just kind of shows the level of flexibility we had. So I think that was just like a really important thing, that it had to work for both sides for it to be.
Yes.
And I would say we've always had a pretty good sense of like the goals, what I was working on, where the church needed, and with Bill's presence, what that was then going to allow me to do. I think that's been a helpful piece. So there's always been some direction behind it. I think a third thing is, and Dan and Bruce had touched on this, I think just like a humility. I have a lot to learn from Bill. I have been eager to learn. I've never thought of Bill as like trying to, wiggle his way in here. There really is no sense of competition that, well, Bill's gunning for this job. It's just been and so that just allows you to just have a kind of a, teach me whatever you want to teach me. I'm open, I'm willing to just hear what you have to say. And there's just been just a real freedom and just a gentleness about that that's so wonderful. And one final thing is, I think it's really what's important about this, making a successful pairing, is not quibbling on doctrinal specifics. I am a dyed-in-the-wool, 5-point Calvinist. I might even be a 6-point Calvinist. And Bill is as Baptist as they get. And so certainly there's areas where we have theological differences. Yet, when I think of the work that we do together, there's never been a time where that has really been highlighted. It's like, I'd like Bill to help out with this, but with his Baptist beliefs, like I can't let him write this devotional, or I can't have him preach on marriage because he's a Baptist, in terms of core orthodoxy, Bill and I agree. Our level of agreement is, I don't know, maybe 98%.
Yes.
And that's what we work out of. We both have a love for the bride of Christ, the church. We both want to see the church flourish and do well. And we've never had any issues. And a couple of times where you were preaching, Bill had said, hey, what do you think can I say this? Is this okay in your context? And so you've been really sensitive to that. And even one time you apologized for something you had said, and I think it said, well, that's what we believe too. Like that's not a problem. Yes. So just some of those things, like just keeping the big picture. We're working towards, reaching the lost. We're trying to disciple the church. We're trying to move towards greater health. And it doesn't matter that we don't have to be in sync on everything. And I just want to caution for people who are thinking about this, really to not get hung up on the denominational distinctives, because there's plenty of people in my denomination whom I don't agree with on everything. And in fact, trying to find someone who sees absolutely every issue just the way I see it, like that person probably does not exist. Or at least I should say I've yet to find that person. But that doesn't mean that there can't be just a camaraderie and a partnership and a mutual respect, and the ability to work together.
I don't think we can overemphasize the beauty of God's hand in the partnerships, because He brought us together. And I'm sitting here as you're kind of making your points, saying, that's what I was going to say. I think the mutual respect and trust has been critical. And as John said, this is not an issue of ego. It's a matter of the kingdom of God and the Church of Jesus Christ. And John has just modeled that so much. He mentioned flexibility. That was very important to me, because I had just retired and I didn't want to get into some kind of a commitment that wouldn't allow me to write, or some of the other things that I had wanted to do for a long time but couldn't while I was in full-time ministry. And so the flexibility that this program provided has been perfect for me. And you'll remember our model really is, this is a one-year partnership, and that's not rigid. And initially I said, I'm not ready to commit to 1 year. Let's start with a 6-month. And it was my concern about the flexibility. And of course, by the end of the 6 months, I was signed on for the next, and now we've gone beyond that. And I think the flexibility has been crucial. The fact that we communicate well, we don't, in our relationship, as you said, the weekly meeting didn't really fit who we were and where we were, but we have had great times of communication. I think there's been a real openness with each other. There's not a fear in that relationship. And I think those things have been very, very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, so we don't have regularly scheduled meetings, but after we finish taping this, we're meeting. So we, hey, we're in the same building, the same time. Let's talk about this vision strategy retreat thing we're having in a week and a half. Let's cross our T's and dot our I's and know exactly what roles we're playing. So we certainly have plenty of times where we do that, but there hasn't been
But there have been seasons when we've needed to meet more because of the particular project that you had me working on, and that's been, again, the flexibility of being more structured when we needed to.
You have to be willing to embrace that your pastor partner is going to be better at some things than you are. So you're inviting somebody in who's going to be excellent. And I'm hoping that people will say yes, because that is exactly what our church needs. Like, I don't need a pastor partner who is at my level or below in all areas. Like, that's not going to help. I need someone who's going to be excellent and gifted in ways that I am not, and just to love that and to thank the Lord for it. And Bill has come in, whether it's in his preaching or strategic leadership, and just been, hit a home run. And I love that. I know that there's people when the week as Bill is preaching, or they'll hear that and it's like, oh, I love when Bill preaches. And I always, there's a rise in me like, yes. And because I think like, me too. But I love that when I am not in the first chair position, whether it's in the pulpit or at a meeting, and Bill is, I love that he excels, that he is really working out of a place of strength. And I'm the biggest cheerleader for that. Why would I want to bring Bill in as a partner, to do a poor job and so I might look better? I think that's just a really shallow approach to thinking about ministry. So I just rejoice to see Bill.
Well, you model what it would be wonderful if every solo pastor would. And that's just been such a privilege. I wanted to pick up again on the denominational difference, because I perceive that some partners may really fear that. And I think this has been a beautiful relationship that way. Our points of agreement are in the high 90s. And I've just been very comfortable when I'm preparing a message to call or email John and say, hey, help me understand, make sure I understand where you are theologically and your denomination, so that I could guard against, doing something that would lack integrity in our relationship.
Well, and at the same time, I've never been in a position to say, Bill, you have to toe the Reformed line here, and you need to say something that you don't believe. Yes. There's ways that we can kind of say what you want to say and still hit that 98% agreement.
Exactly.
And so that's been, and I agree. I think that the fear of denominational distinctives, may discourage people. And I really think at this point, that would just be a tool of the devil to really keep people from seeking partnerships. And hopefully, and I hold my doctrine and my beliefs very seriously. But I think we also have to have some humility in this, and that, no one has the complete corner on the truth. And that if you don't agree exactly as I do on everything, that you would not be of value, and that your beliefs do not have a lot of thought and, scriptural backing behind them. We may disagree on interpretation, but I can say we've been together over 2 years, and we've worked closely on a number of projects, and never once have we said, well, we just can't do this because we don't see eye to eye on this. We've never even come like remotely in that neighborhood. It's never even been an issue. So just a caution against people to say, like, well, I don't know if I want to work outside of my circle.
Certainly there may be some situations where denominations are so far apart that the match might not be as successful. Certainly. But from an outsider's perspective, seeing the two of you and having watched this partnership grow, I think I would be confident in saying that actually it has been a benefit to the match that you guys come from slightly different denominations and theological backgrounds, because I have seen both of you actually grow more with each other than I think if you were both completely aligned in exactly the same theology.
That's good, and I think it gives us an opportunity not only to grow ourselves, but to model something. For Pastor John, the church he pastors, for the church that I'm still part of, that I pastored for so many years, I think it's a beautiful thing for them to see us working together with compatibility in spite of some minor differences. And I think we all carry some stereotypes about those Baptists, or those Reformed, or those Presbyterians, or those Charismatics. And I think this relationship helps to rip down some of those stereotypes that we may carry, to help us to have a bigger picture of the body of Christ.
In business, we call those silos.
Yes.
And we talk about tearing down the silos. And I see how your match as a model for how you can break down some of those denominational barriers that often prevent people from working better together for the glory of Christ.
Absolutely. And as John said, it doesn't mean that either of us surrender those minor points of denominational difference. We hold those deeply, but it doesn't hinder us to be able to work in the vast area where we're in complete agreement.
Well, I can say when we were starting with this, and you made a pitch here to us to get started, one of the things was, well, isn't Bill Baptist, and aren't there any Reformed people we could call on? There was a question that came up. And I forget if it was you or me who had said, well, as soon as we can find, the gist of the answer was, as soon as we could find someone with, 40 plus years of ministry experience with a doctorate, who's led a church of thousands of people, who has an impeccable, integrity, and who's Reformed, then we'll go get them, But until then,
and is in our geographical small area.
Yes, who lives 10 miles away. Until then, we're going to try Bill.
Well, thanks for taking the risk on settling today.
Yes. Yeah, we're still looking for that person, by the way. So you never know. And I think that was just one of the things. And honestly, the people here take their theology very seriously. And I think Bill's first sermon put an end to anything. There has never been a question at all about where Bill stands, and his skillful understanding of Scripture when he's preaching, his commitment to the church, his handling of different situations with people and teams and committees. It's been just fabulous. So
the point is, it can work.
Yeah, and work beautifully.
We're all benefiting.
So, pastors, when you were first introduced to Pastor Partner and the idea, you probably had certain thoughts of what you thought it might be like. And today, several years into this, your ideas have probably changed. Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
I think right up front, one of the things that has changed is I was skeptical about the financial model, that it could work. I probably didn't say that at the time, but I was skeptical, and it has worked beautifully now in our initial and renewed times and in the other partnership. I think the beauty of funding this outside the church budget, so it doesn't have to impact the church budget, and yet the funding is coming from within the church. But it's a creative approach that you've helped the churches with, and I was wonderfully surprised at how good a model it was.
Well, you were the first one who talked to me about this model, and as God led me through this idea of Pastor Partner, that was one of the key things that I felt was missing until you had told me about how you felt like the missionaries needed to change their funding model from, give me $50 a month until Jesus comes back, to more of a, hey, we want to build this church in Zimbabwe, and this is how much it's going to cost, and this is the end result. Here's some pretty pictures, and this is the timeline, more project-based. And so that was really that missing piece to Pastor Partner, in that so often the reason the churches can't get unstuck from that solo pastor is because they don't think they have the money to call another pastor and risk having to let him go because they can barely make budget every year. Whereas Pastor Partner is a pre-funded project like remodeling the sanctuary that you don't have to do it until you have the money. And then it's a short-term commitment. Everybody's aware of that up front, and you know what the benefits are going to be, you know what the timeline is going to be, and you know what the cost is going to be.
Yes.
So that's definitely a key point of...
Well, you're taking that thought and applying it to a different area is just the beauty of partnership again. And I think it's been exciting here. As I understand, you've had people come forward to say, I'm in for the next time before you even ask, because it has worked.
That was a great reaffirming of this project for First Reformed, is the fact that there were people who came to me during our first match, during the first project, and said, I'm in for the next one. I'm already putting money aside for the next match, because they could see how great it was.
And I think that's so crucial, because in my opinion, one of the first things that will come up in a solo pastor's mind when he hears about this is, our church can't afford it. And so what was a surprise to me is a real selling point. Yes, your church probably can afford it.
Awesome. Pastor John, your thoughts?
How my thoughts have changed, or my understanding. I very much thought, that this was going to be a help, and it was. So I think for the most part, I kind of had that figured out, and it's played out the way I thought it could. If it worked well, this is how it would work, and it has worked well. I think the thing that I didn't necessarily understand the importance of, or the significance of, is having a friend in ministry. And that, and I don't suspect every partnership would work out this way, but Bill's become a dear friend, and that's just been, instrumental. And again, I can have a conversation and just say, this is what's going on in my family. And I've had, I think, 2 conversations with Bill where I've said, there is nobody else that I can tell this to. And having just a trusted friend, on the other side of a table, to be able to share that with, I didn't expect that. And also kind of the relational piece, I had really forgotten, being a solo pastor for so long, the power of brainstorming and
Yes.
teamwork, and Bill and I sitting down and plotting out a series of messages. And even if Bill isn't going to be doing it, any of the messages, talking through it, or I'll throw out 3 or 4 ideas, and Bill will say, well, I've done this, or I'll say, Bill, I know you've preached on this, you've done this before. What works, what doesn't? I think that I had kind of overlooked that aspect of pastor-partner, of just the power of kind of the 1 + 1 = 3,
Yes.
of that. And so the really the relational aspect was something I think I had overlooked in getting this thing off the ground. I was like, I've got my workhorse here, yes, we're gonna move, and but in that, the friendship, the true partnership that would come out of that, and having a person fill a place in my life that I had not previously had, I didn't expect that.
I didn't anticipate that aspect either. I looked forward to the professional relationship and the benefits that would flow. But as I've said to you, when I'm done with the partnership, I hope I'm still your friend, because we want to continue
Yes.
that aspect of it. I think another surprise to me was I thought that in this partnership, I'd be doing a number of ministry kind of things that weren't necessarily my passion, that didn't require my level of experience, but they could be a help to you. So I would be happy to do those in this part-time, flexible relationship. But again, it's the beauty of God bringing people together, because what instead developed was I didn't just get grunt work, which is perfectly all right.
Some pastors are going to need grunt work.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And when a person can bring that aspect, I was happy to do that. But it's been beautiful to see how John's vision and the needs of the church were such a matchup with what I love to do and where my experience lay.
Mm-hmm.
John, you'd mentioned this, and I think from an outside perspective, a lot of people think that a solo pastor has support in their lay people, in their leadership team, elders, deacons, those type of people, and that's who they brainstorm with and talk about ideas with. But the real missing piece there is that those are all people that are not committed to serving. That's not their life occupation. They didn't go to seminary. They're not a pastor. They didn't commit their life to serving the Lord in this role. They're typically from other occupations. Maybe they're retired, but they came from other occupations. So it's not the same. it's not the same as being able to have those kind of ideas and brainstorms with another pastor who has been yoked as you have, as you said.
Yeah, when we have meetings and all that kind of stuff, and I've got just a wonderful church and fantastic, gifted leaders who come alongside and have really, God's done wonderful things through them. But the reality is not one of them has ever sat on my side of the desk. And Bill has. And that in itself makes him a unique help, a unique partner. Like, not only has he walked in my shoes, he's walked, so many more miles than I have in my shoes. And he is just distinct, unique, and he fills a role that even the best of elders, the best of deacons, the best of ministry team leaders cannot fill that role. They just don't know. And
that's a huge statement coming from you, John, because in my perspective, First Reformed has an unusual level of lay leadership, of committed people who are capable, and it's just, I think it's a reflection of your ministry here and God working in the church. But as you said, it's still different.
yeah,
And I could volunteer for some things at Beacons and help here and there and hopefully make a difference. But I don't have the foggiest idea what it's like to sit in your chair. Well, maybe that's a little overstatement, but I don't. And so for us to be committed in ministry together, there's a level of both fellowship and professional help there, sharpening.
So pastor partner won't be never ending for First Reformed Church. There's a goal. There's an end time at some point.
We're going to stop.
And so what have you guys talked about as the end result or the end goal of this pastor partner match for First Reformed Church?
Well, one of the things we started off was just the big idea of pastor partners. We wanted to work towards the church seeing the value of a second staff ministry person. And so after having Bill here for a time, we were able to bring another person on part-time who's not ordained, but a very seasoned ministry veteran, very skilled, gifted person. And we have now outlined a 3-year plan, and we're kind of second year of that, of moving them from a part-time to a full-time position. So using their gifts and their abilities. And so in some ways, some of the ways that Bill is helping, this person is going to be able to really kind of fill some of those roles. And as a side note, it was Bill who was the one who recommended this person to our church when we were at a job search. So he was outside of our circle of folks, and Bill brought somebody in and recommended him. It was an instant match. And so we're working towards that yes. Just the value of having other leaders, ministry leaders. And this person, even though they're not ordained, would fulfill, some pastoral functions, and the person has done this in the past. But the other thing is Bill has mentioned, we don't want this friendship to end, and he's even graciously offered when the formal pastor partner is over, I'll still help. He said, anytime you would need me to preach, I would still be glad to do that. And I said, absolutely. So even though I think that there may be an end to a formal relationship with this, in many ways, I think just we're going to keep the benefits of this going, because it's like I still want Bill to be able to come and to free me up to be able to do things. And
I think another long-term thing is that John had some visions of things that would make a difference for the church virtually into the future, forever, but hadn't had the opportunity. I'm thinking of the outreach ministry related to pre-marriage. And John had this amazing idea, just hadn't had time to get it finalized and launched. And he allowed me to come into that process, to pick his brain, to keep coming back with questions. And then the question was sustaining, and frankly, I was a little worried that once it was launched, that it wouldn't be able to be sustained without some additional staff help. And yet the way that John contributed in the construction of the project was also such that long after I'm gone, that ministry can keep going. John is carrying it. There are others, I think, who have participated and can be added to it. And so there's a ministry of outreach that can continue long past our partnership that God laid on John's heart, and I was able to be the person who stepped in and gave it the other shove.
And certainly some pastor-partner matches may be a year, they may be 2 years, they may be 3 or 4 years, or some may continue on in a non-formal way after the formal match is completed. But the goal, I think, for First Reformed Church was to get the church to a point where it realized it could afford another pastoral type position, and that it needed it, and that it would benefit from it.
Yes.
And I think the beauty of what you guys have set up is that not only did you help in the search and finding of that person, but also you're helping in the training of it, so that training of that person, so that Pastor John is, as the solo pastor, isn't burdened with, oh, now I have to lead a search committee, and now I have to train that person, and that pastor partner match. One of the benefits of the last year or two of the match could be to train this new person in everything that the pastor partner has learned about the solo pastor and the church, and get them trained and up to speed so that they can step in and start to do things for that solo pastor right away.
If I could say too, we are of course hoping and praying that every partnership will be as wonderful as our first ones have been. But we recognize that there are probably solo pastors out there who are serving in what sadly we would call a toxic church. And it doesn't matter how good a job he does or a partner might do, barring a supernatural miracle, that church is going to continue to be toxic and chew up and spit out pastors like they have in the past. And I envision that there may be a time when a pastor partner comes along and may not be able to assist in bringing that church to health, but may be able to help that solo pastor survive and not conclude it's all because I just can't cut it. And there may even be a time when a partner says, you know what, my brother, you have gifts, you should be in ministry, you need to pray about a different place because you're not going to thrive here, your family will not thrive here, you need to look for a change. And we hope that that's 1%. But there may be those churches, and there may be a solo pastor watching this video who is in that position and needs that kind of assistance.
Good point.
And we've talked about what success looks like for this, and it can be, I think our minds typically just go to like, well, church growth and, better numbers and more people and more effective, efficient ministries. But I think a really big part of it is also just going back to like the health of the pastor is, maybe the end goal is there is a pastor who has a renewed passion or a renewed call to just ministry, not to leave. Just staying in ministry is the end goal. Or marriages that are flourishing, or more time spent with children at home. So it isn't just necessarily let's look at in terms of programs and strategies and numbers, and because I think it's easy to go there, but there's this whole other realm of like just the person. And what if the success is this person stays at a church, or this person stays in ministry, this person stays married? Because of this. And so I think we just have to think more holistically about what it would mean for a person to have somebody to come alongside them, and what an end goal or what success might be defined as.
One of our taglines as Pastor Partner talks about that, and it says, revitalizing God's church, one pastor at a time. Because I think that's so true, that without a healthy, revitalized pastor, you can't possibly expect a healthy, revitalized church.